Hey everyone, it's Connie from ConnieTech, and today we're going to build a real simple React application that will allow users to create ERC tokens and we'll be able to customize the name, the symbol, and also to interact with those tokens once created. So our app will actually implement all the methods of the ERC-20, including the transfer of some tokens and also the ability to check the balance, approve another address to spend some amount of those tokens in our name. So again, this application will be really simple. This is just intended for beginners to learn about ERC-20 and how to implement it in a client application. And basically, I'm doing this for you. So as a developer, you have a simple resource where you can refer to continue and build bigger projects. All right, so let's jump into what it looks like, and then we're going to build it. Okay, so now I just started the application and now it's waiting for a connection with my wallet. So I do use Metamask. I recommend you also use Metamask because it's very easy to use. And so just press next and connect and boom. So now my application is connected to Metamask in my browser and I'm able to interact with ERC-20 tokens. So I can either import a token using its address or create a token. So I'm going to create one. We're going to name it silver as such, SVR as a symbol, and as the initial supply, we're going to say 1. So actually you can see 18 zeros there. It means that our token is using 18 decimals. So this is the default for most implementations of the ERC-20 tokens, but you can change that if you change the Solidity smart contract. We're not going to do that, but it's very easy to use. And I will show you in this video where you're able to change it. So you can make the change if you want to. So those decimals are really useful if you want to send partial amounts. For instance, if I want to send just 0.5, I will actually have only 17 zeros there and a 5 there that will allow me to have an initial supply of 0.5. All right, so we'll set it back to 1 as the initial supply, and we're going to create this token. So now MetaMask is asking us to verify that we actually want to send the transaction to the Ethereum network. Make sure before you do that you are on the test network. I am on the Ring-B network, which is very easy to use, and it validates block pretty fast. So it's great during development. All right, so now we're waiting for our transaction to be accepted into the blockchain, validated in a block. Okay, so now it's fine. Our token has been successfully deployed at this address. So we can actually verify that it has been if we go directly to the contract deployment in MetaMask and click View on Etherscan. So we're going to view what happened with this transaction on Etherscan. So yeah, we just have to wait a couple seconds for Etherscan to process the transaction. And now, boom, so it's processed. So it says, okay, the transaction, the field 2 is set to this contract that has been created. So if we click on this contract, it will actually recognize that it is an ERC-20 token. So as you can see here, tracker says, okay, it's a silver SVR. Great. And so that's perfect. That's our token. So now we're having, so it says the balance is actually 0 Ether because all the amount that we just created, so the 1 initial supply actually goes directly back into our wallet. This is how we're going to implement that ERC token. So the user of the app directly receives all the initial supply of this token. But you can change that if you want to. Okay, so now we're going to go to token info. All right, so now we can see inside of the token info page. So we have the address of the token contract we just created, the name of it, of the contract, of the token and its symbol, the total supply, the decimals, and the current balance. So actually, the initial supply was 1, and following the implementation of this ERC token, all of the initial supply was sent back to the creator. So the creator is us. So it shows, okay, the current balance is 1 for us. So all those information have just been fetched from the blockchain actually. So using Web3. So okay, we're gonna check the balance of our account. We're gonna take, okay, copy the address to the clipboard, and we can say, okay, balance off, and boom, we get one. We actually have one token, and we can also use all the other functions that are implemented inside of the ERC-20 token. And so let's create that. So before we start, we will install many dependencies in this project. So if you don't want to install packages one by one using npm, what you can do is go to the GitHub page that's in the description and download package-lock.json and package.json in an empty folder, just like this. And from here, what you want to do is you want to just do npm ci, and it's going to install all the dependencies with the exact versions that I have. So you won't have any deprecated version of the packages, and everything will work. So let's start building the application. First, make sure you have Node installed and a version of npm that's superior to greater than 5.2. The reason for that is that we want to have npx install, because we're going to use npx to create our React application really fast using create React app. Okay, so just enter npx create React app and the name of the project. So create React app is really useful when you want to start building a React application and you don't want to install everything manually. So create React app will do all of that for you, and you will have a simple React application that is already configured and working for you to just add features onto. So it's really practical. Okay, so the installation is complete. So now I can see I have the ERC's demo folder installed, and I can just jump into this folder, and I will do code this folder. So that will open Visual Code inside of this folder. All right, so now I do have my folder on the right. I'm going to open up a new terminal, and I'm going to test that the installation has been completed successfully. So I'm about to start the development server for the newly created React application. Okay, so now it seems to be loading, and here we have it. Perfect. Okay, so now we can stop the development server as we don't need it right away. So just do it by pressing Ctrl+C. So now we're gonna install Hardhat. So for that, just do npm install hardhat --save-dev to install it as a development dependency. So it's not included in production. Hardhat is it's a development environment for smart contracts. So it will be very useful for us to compile the ERC-20 token smart contract and then be able to get the ABI of this contract to import it into Web3 so that we can be able to interact with the contract from the client application. So I recommend using Hardhat over Truffle because, in my opinion, it is easier to just understand and use and configure, and it has a better documentation. And I find the community is a bit more engaged around Hardhat. Okay, so now it's installed. Now let's set up our Hardhat project. So we're gonna go to source, and we're gonna create a folder called Solidity. Let's go into this folder, and then we're gonna create four other folders. So we have contracts to store contracts, test if we want to do testing, cache, and artifacts. So cache and artifacts will be used by Hardhat to compile, and so the cache will be used for temporary files and artifacts for final compiled files. All right, so now head back to our original folder and type in npx hardhat as such. And now just select create an empty hardhat.config.js. Okay, great. We have it here. Open it, and now it's saying, okay, the version of Solidity will be 7.3. So actually, we want a more recent version of it. So we're just gonna go with 8.3 like this, and we're going to set some custom path here, basically just specifying all the path that the folders that we created. Okay, so it's gonna be source / solidity / contracts. Then we have test. That's gonna be source solidity test. Then we have cache. That's gonna be source, you guessed it, solidity cache. And finally, the last one, artifacts. Artifacts equal source solidity artifacts. Great. So now we do have our configuration file ready. Now we're going to test our Hardhat configuration by creating a new contract. So we're going to create a new contract into Solidity contracts with a new file. That's going to be contract.sol. This contract will be very simple. Just say pragma solidity, the version we're using, so it's 0.83, and then contract, and okay, it's trying to help me here, and boom, just save it, and now you should be able to compile this contract by pressing npx hardhat compile. Great, so it compiled it with Solidity compiler 0.3.8.3, and it's successful. So now we're about to actually get some ERC-20 implementation from the OpenZeppelin organization. So those implementation of ERC-20 are have the reputation of being really secure. So we're gonna go there and we're gonna type OpenZeppelin ERC-20 on Google, and you'll find the GitHub. So it's OpenZeppelin contracts as such. Great. So now what we want to do, we're gonna download all the contracts. So download as a zip file and put it into one of your folders. I'm gonna put it here. If you don't know about OpenZeppelin, I definitely recommend that you go check them out. They are an amazing organization, and they basically are very focused on security. And so ERC-20 is just a definition of what a token should be. And so there are different implementations that you can find, but the OpenZeppelin ones are kind of considered as the standard in terms of security. Before we add OpenZeppelin contract into our project, we want to make sure we are in a clean state. So we're going to delete contract.sol that we just created to test the compilation and add a folder inside contracts. That's going to call OpenZeppelin, like such. Great. So now go to the zip file you just downloaded, unzip it, open it, and go to contracts. And we're not going to take all the folders, but we're going to take access, interfaces, security, tokens, and utils. So you want to drop them, drag and drop them into OpenZeppelin as such. Now I'm just going to run npx hardhat compile again to verify that the OpenZeppelin contracts actually compile. So now we can see 105 files. So we don't need all of the contracts, but for the sake of this video, I don't want to go inside all the contracts and take the ones, just the ones that we need. So we're going to take all the contracts for that, and we'll actually just use some of them from inside this folder, but definitely not all of them. Okay, so now and inside the folder contracts, you're going to create a new file that's going to be called ERC-20 Token.Sol as such. Great. So basically what we're doing here, we're going to use the implementation of the ERC token that's inside of the OpenZeppelin contract, and we're going to create our own ERC-20 token contract that's going to inherit from the OpenZeppelin implementation. So it's basic use of inheritance. If you're not familiar with inheritance, I highly recommend that you go check what it is. So if we go to the OpenZeppelin folder, inside of it, you will notice that we have a token folder. And inside of this token folder, we have the ERC-20, and we can see, the ERC-20 interface. So this interface is actually the ERC-20 interface that's used by that's used to implement the ERC-20, but it doesn't define the logic. It only contains the methods. So what we can actually do with the ERC-20 without any logic. So we can check the total supply, the balance. If we pass an address as a parameter, we can get back the balance. We can transfer, do the allowance, and approve some amounts, so someone else will be able to spend our own token, and do transfer from to actually transfer some token from someone else to a recipient. Great. And here is the implementation by OpenZeppelin. which is in the ERC-20.sol file. And so this contains all the logic for this token. And so I told you beforehand that the decimals default was 18, and as you can see here, it's set there, decimals 18. So in the OpenZeppelin implementation, in this one, because you have multiple implementation, and if you want to see extensions, you can see other implementations, more advanced or with different features, but we're going to stick to the default one. And so with the default one, we only have 18 decimals. Well, it's not customizable, but we could definitely make it customizable by adding a parameter here in the constructor, saying, for instance, uint 8 decimals, and then passing it, storing it here as a parameter, and then directly putting it here. But we are not going to do that. We are going to keep this contract unchanged. Okay, so now let's go back to the contract we created, which is named ERC-20 token. So first, we're going to say, okay, pragma, solidity, and the version we're using. Great. Oh, pragma doesn't work. Of course. Okay. Great. So now we want to import the ERC-20 implementation from OpenZeppelin. So we're going to do OpenZeppelin /token /ERC20 /ERC20.sol. And here we have it. So in my VS Code, I have an error here, but it's actually not an error. It's an extension I have that's causing this, so just ignore it. Okay, so we're going to define our contract. So I'm going to say contract ERC20 token is ERC20. So it means that my contract inherits from the ERC20 token that is actually the implementation of OpenZeppelin. Great. And then I'm going to define a constructor, pass string memory name. So we can call this contract and set a name to the token, string memory symbol, same for the symbol, and uint 256 for the initial supply. Perfect. And I'm going to say, okay, then call the constructor of the parent with name and symbol as arguments. So what it's gonna do is when it enters the constructor here, it's gonna pass the name and symbol as parameters to the constructor of the parent. It's actually the constructor, the base constructor of this contract. So it simply means the constructor of the parents it inherits from. And then we're going to do, to create the initial supply, we're going to do mint. We're going to specify message.sender, because message.sender, the first parameter is to who the minted amount will go to. So we want the minted amount to go back to the creator of the token. And then we're going to specify initial supply. Great. Now we save it and let's try to compile it. Great. So now the compilation worked, and we'll be switching back to React to start creating the client application that will allow us to interact with this ERC token. And if you go to the folders, and if you go into Solidity, Artifacts, Source, now you can see ERC20 token, that's all. if you go to the JSON file, you're gonna find all the information of the compiled contracts, and inside of this you will find the ABI. If you don't know what the ABI is, it's simply an interface that will pass to the client application for it to know how to communicate with the contract. So, for example, if we want to call the constructor, well, in the ABI, we actually have the constructor, and we can see, okay, the internal type is string uint, and it's the name that we have to pass, then the symbol, then the initial supply. So the ABI really defines how we can interact and call the methods of the smart contracts. All right, so let's go to the client app and we're going to build it. First of all, there are a couple of files that we can remove because we won't need them during the development. Okay, so you have first app.css, app.test.js, report web vitals, and setup test, and logo.svg. So you can remove those files just like this. And we're gonna head to index.js. And from there, you can remove the report web vitals and the function call just right there. So the first thing we're about to do is to implement Metamask and make sure the wallet in the browser connects to our application once we enter the application. So let's go to app.js. And from here, we're basically going to remove kind of everything. And we're going to just start from scratch. It's going to be better. And so for this, we're going to need Web3. So Web3 is an Ethereum JavaScript API. So if you don't know what this is, I recommend you go check out their page. It's basically an API in JavaScript that allows you to send transaction, call the Ethereum blockchain, or make some API calls to a node or a service such as Infura. That will allow you to basically interact with the Ethereum blockchain, and as well as many utils like converting Ether to Way and many other things. So we're going to use this to interact with Ethereum. So in order to get it to work, we first need to install it. So we're going to press npm install. So you can also install with I if you don't know. And npm I web3. Okay, so now let's do an arrow function. Okay, so I have an extension that does snippets, which is very useful. For example, just for this, I just needed to press to type RAF, and I had this coming out. So this extension is ES7 React Redux. This is very useful. All right, so we have this imported. What I really want to import from React is use state and use effect, and also because we just imported it, I want Web3. So const Web3 equals require Web3. So here we're getting the class Web3. So remember, we will need to instantiate the class. This is not usable just right now. Okay. So first of all, we will define two states. So the first one will be wallet connected and set wallet connected to set the state. And it's gonna have a default value set to false. And then we're gonna have a second state, which is gonna be instruction. Those are the instructions that we're gonna display to users. instructions as such, and use state, and the default value will be waiting for connection with wallet. This is pretty explicit. Great. So now, what we want to do is we want to return. We will have a couple of conditions there. So first, we want to say, hey, if we have window.ethereum defined, so window.ethereum will be defined in the browser only if there is one wallet that is either EIP 1102 or EIP 1193 compliant. So MetaMask is a wallet compliant with those standards, and but you also have other wallets. So our application will be compatible with all the wallets that do implement those standards. All right. So now we're gonna do okay. So if window.ethereum is defined, we're gonna say, hey, is the wallet already connected? If yes, for now we're just gonna display some h1 connected, and otherwise we're going to display some instructions, right? And if window.ethereum is not defined, well, in that case, we'll say MetaMask or other EIP 1102, EIP 1193 compliant wallet not found. Okay, great. So the user knows that they need a wallet compliant. Okay, so this is great for now. This is perfect. So here, well, we're gonna have to do a little something to actually set instructions in case of being connected to the wallet or not, and also just try to connect to the wallet in the browser. All right, so we're gonna do this with the use effect. So we're gonna do use effect with the narrow function, just like so. Perfect. And to make sure it just runs only once, we're gonna pass an empty array, just like that. Okay. And so use effect will get called once the app gets loaded, but it will get called only once. Okay. So we're gonna say, okay, const connect wallet. So this is gonna be an asynchronous function that will try to connect with the wallet. So again, this is an arrow function. And inside of it, we're going to first check if window.ethereum is not defined. We're going to return right away. And in this case, so if window.ethereum is not defined, we return right away, and it's okay because here, if it's not defined, it's gonna directly display this. Okay, then we want to do try catch here, and we're going to do an await window.ethereum.send. So this is the way to request the connection with the wallet, request account. This is the new way of doing it. Before it wasn't like this. So since 2021, it's like this. And then window.web3 equals new web3 window.ethereum. And in the case where the user refuses to connect, it will produce an error. So here, in case of an error, we're going to do set instruction wallet connection denied. Reload the page to try again. And we will return just after that. In the case where this is successful, we will set the instruction to an empty string to reset the instruction, and then we will do set wallet connected true. Of course, we also want to call this function because for now it's only declared, so we're going to call it just after declaring it, like so. And let's test this functionality inside our app. Okay, so I'm going to reload, and from here, as you can see, it says waiting for connection with wallet. So if I press on cancel, wallet connection denied, so it shows the instruction we just set, and I'm going to reload. Now waiting for connection with wallet, and if I press next and connect, now it's connected. Congratulations. So we will now pass to the next step, which is to implement the rest of the application. And for that, we're going to create a new component that will be called app authenticated that we're going to place here. So let's do this. Okay, so the next step is to install a couple of dependencies. And I promise this is the last time we install dependencies in this project. So we're going to install emotion.react. So those dependencies will actually handle the UI and a couple other things. So we have emotion styled, MUI slash icons material, MUI slash material. We got MUI slash styles, MUI slash x data grid, and finally we got decimal.js. Great, so we're gonna install all of them. The quick way is to just paste npmi in front of all of them, just like that. And this sign twice. I don't know how it's called in English. And boom. So we're going to copy all of them and go just paste this into the command line and press enter. Once everything is installed, we can just quit this, and we will create a new folder in source that will have the name of components. And inside of it, we're going to create app authenticated.js. Right? And now we will replace inside of app.js that connected label that we put with app authenticated. Right. So we want to make sure to import it. Right. Inside of app authenticated, we're going to do an arrow function. Okay, just like that. Great. And so we're gonna write a lot of code here. This code is to display this app. So this is gonna be the kind of the basis of our application. And so we're gonna have a drawer on the left with a button for ERC-20. So why a button? It's because after that I plan to expand this application with more ERCs. So we will be able to select ERC-20 and more. So we'll do that, and over here we will have our application with the title at the top. Okay, so let's get started and follow me on this one. So first of all, we're gonna define a variable that's gonna have the name drawer width. So this is the width of the drawer that appears on the left side. And we're gonna do in the return, we're gonna have a box. Okay, so you can see here, it's proposing me the box from UI. I'm gonna take it. Okay, box, just like this, and I'm gonna add, so S6 allows to specify some custom style. I'm gonna do display flex inside of the box. Then we're gonna do CSS baseline like such. Then we're gonna do a nav bar. So all of this is a bit of CSS to get our application looking great. Okay, so position fixed. Then we're gonna have some custom CSS width. So this is for the width of the app bar, and we're gonna have so put backticks here because we're gonna put a variable inside of the string calc. So 100% minus the drawer width that we previously defined. After that, we're going to say pixels, okay, comma, ml for margin left, and backticks. And again, we continue, we set the drawer width, like such, and then pixels like so. And then we close here the app bar, and we open it like this. And so inside of the app bar, we're gonna have a toolbar. What's the issue? App bar is not defined. Okay, so make sure you define and follow what I defined over here. So we're gonna do import app bar from MIUI material. And that's great. Now toolbar. We're gonna add a toolbar. So same here. We're gonna add the toolbar. So we're gonna import the toolbar. Great. Now we have it. Toolbar, and inside of the toolbar, we're gonna add. So this is for the title, typography, like such, and then variant. So it's gonna be an H6. So it's just kind of title we want to put in. And then no wrap component equal div. Great. And inside of it, we're gonna write Ethereum ERC's demo. Great. So now we do have our title. So we're gonna check that it looks great. So we're gonna do npm start to start the development build. Okay, so at this point, we do have the title, but we don't have the drawer yet. So let's implement that. So we're gonna go below the box here, and we're gonna do, okay, just above the box and below the app bar, and we're gonna do drawer like this. So make sure it's included here. And drawer sx equals, so we're gonna add a bit of style. So this is the last time in this document that we're gonna add a lot of style like this. So we're gonna put the width to the drawer width. Then we're gonna do flex shrink, set it to 0. Then we're gonna add some properties just like this to the drawer. So drawer paper is really for kind of a nice look for the drawer. And to it, we're going to say, okay, drawer width, box sizing like this. And we're going to say, okay, border box. And that's it for this one. And after that, we're going to say, okay, the variant of the drawer is permanent, so meaning that the drawer will not hide on the left, and we're gonna anchor it to the left. We can also anchor it to the right, and close the bracket here, close the drawer here, and inside of it we're gonna add one toolbar like so, then a divider. Again, you'll have to include the divider, so make sure it's there. I include it by just pressing tab, but you might have to write it yourself. The divider, then a list. Same for the list. I just press tab and boom, it's added here. So the list, and inside of it, we're going to enter list item button. So I press tab, so it's added up here, and then list item button. Inside of it, we're going to say, okay, list item text. Perfect. Primary equals ERC-20, because for now, this is the ERC-20 we are implementing. So this is great. And make sure you have list item button and also list item text included up here. This is great. And so now we have the drawer on the left, but we want the last thing, which will contain the buttons and everything to basically interact with the contract. So we're going to say, okay, component equals main SX, just a little bit of style here, but not as much as previously. So flex grow 1, beige, so background color. We're going to say background dot default, then p3 for padding, and then we're going to close the box here. Okay, so yeah, I want to close this here, so actually I made a mistake, so I have to remove the little sign that was there. Okay, now inside of the box I want to add one toolbar. Okay, like this, closing, and one h1. So this is where we're going to put our content. So h1 content, yay. And we're going to put all the buttons in here, and we're going to actually start to manipulate some Ethereum and Web3. So let's see how it looks now inside of the React app. And it looks like this. So we successfully implemented the left drawer, and now we have the title, and we are ready to implement the content. Great, so now that we have a great foundation for our application, the fun will begin. So what we're going to do is inside the component folder, we're going to create a new folder called ERC-20. Right, and so inside of this folder, we're going to create two files. So the first one is going to be ERC-20 app.js. So this is, in this file, we're going to define, this is the foundation for all the ERC-20 manipulation processes and basically the interface for interacting with our ERC-20 smart contract that we just compiled before a little bit earlier in this video. So we're going to create another file, ERC-20 create. So this file will handle the creation of the token. Okay, so ERC-20, as we've done previously, just create an React arrow function. So just like this, then save it. We're going to go back to app authenticated, and instead of content, we're going to add here ERC20 app. E20 app. Okay, so I press tab just like this. I'm going to close I'm going to put a slash and greater than just to close the ERC-20. And because I pressed tab, it's already included inside of my file. Okay, so now I do have this ERC-20 app here, and inside of my web app, we don't see anything, but it's actually there. So let's start and build this application. So first of all, we're going to import a couple of things. So we're going to import use state from React, like so. We can delete this line, the first one I just had. And then we're going to import a link and box from UI/material. Then we're gonna import ERC-20 create from, well, ERC-20 create. Perfect. So we can go inside of ERC-20 create and just define an arrow function, even if we don't do anything with it for now. Great. So now back to our ERC-20 app. What we're going to do, we're going to define some menus. So it's an enum that we're about to define. Menu, though, so it's going to contain basically the state. So each menu. So we have the default menu, the create menu. So the default is basically the main menu. We can actually call it main. And import. Okay, great. Now inside of ERC-20 app, we're going to add some state. So const menu and set menu equals use state menu dot main. So this is the default menu. So the default menu is the main menu. And so const another state token address, set token address. Okay, equals to use state, and we're not going to put anything. So token address is basically the address for the import token. But we're not going to use it just yet. We're going to use it later when we implement the import function. Okay, so now we have our return. Inside of it, we're going to say, we're going to put a conditional. So we're going to display something if the menu is not the default. So in that case, we are going to display a box with a bit of custom CSS. So some height, and close the grade the angle sign, and then we're going to put a link inside of here with nothing in the href. On click. So this is the onClick event, and we're going to say, well, when we click on this, it will actually go to the menu.main. So this is we are implementing a simple back button that will be really useful when we are in one of the two menus that are not the main menu. So either the create or the import, and a bit of custom styling as well. That's it. And then we're going to close the angle bracket, put back in here, and here we are. So we do have our back button. So great. So what it does is basically when we click on it, it will set the menu back to main. Pretty simple. And then we're going to have another conditional here that's going to say, well, if menu equals menu.main, and so we will have to create an ERC-20. So let's just write it and we will create this component later on. ERC-20 main menu, on-click create equals so on-click creates is a function that we will pass to the component main menu. So when we click on create, it will do something. So we need to define this function here. And we're going to say, okay, const on-click create equals narrow function, basically just setting the menu to menu.create. So very simple. So we're going to say, okay, on click create, we're going to pass the function on click create. And we are good here. And we can directly just close the angle bracket here. And so it says there is an error because it's not created yet. So let's create it. New file, ERC-20 main menu.js. Okay, great. And inside of it, okay, we're gonna do a narrow function just as we've made previously. Okay, so let's go back to ERC-20 app, and you can directly either copy this one down, but I'm gonna write it entirely for you. Menu equals menu dot create. So in the case where we are inside of menu dot create, we want to show ERC-20 create, the component we created a bit earlier. Okay, and that's it. Perfect. So now ERC-20 is not defined, so we have to import it. ERC-20 main menu. Now it's imported. Now let's go to the ERC-20 main menu, and we're gonna work on this one. So first of all, we're gonna import use state. Then we're gonna import button, grid, and text field from MUI material, just like this. And then we're gonna do we're gonna actually import add as a prop that was passed. If you remember here, we passed onClick create as a prop to ERC-20 main menu. So now we have to define the prop. Now it's here onClick create. And inside of the return, what we're gonna do, we don't want a div here. We're gonna put a grid just like this with the property container spacing equals 2. So it looks pretty nice. Then grid item XS equals 12. Okay, great. So this is 12 means that it will take all the space on the width, and so we don't want to have multiple columns here. And so we're going to create a button, and so inside of the button, we're going to say, hey, variant equals contained. So this is a bit of styling, so our buttons will look great in our application. And I invite you to tweak those values so you will see what it does. And onClick, I'm going to say onClick equals an arrow function. And when we click on this button, we actually call onClick create. So this is the button to enter the create menu. And so inside of the button, we're going to say create token, like so. Great. So now, if we go back to our application, we're going to have create token here. Okay, so actually I made a mistake, and there is somewhere to go back to, but inside of ERC-20 app, I'm saying, hey, display the back button if the menu is different than menu.default. However, it's when it's different than menu.main, because when we are in the main menu, we don't want to display it, but we want to display the back button in all other menus. So now we are inside of the main menu, and we have the create token button. Very simply, you can test the flow. You can click on create token and then go back. So here we're inside the menu create, and we're going to implement the creation. So let's close that, and let's go to ERC-20 create. Okay, so let's import just use state from React, like so, and then import a couple of things from Material UI. First one will be typography, then button, then text field, then grid, circular progress, and alert. Perfect. Okay. Now, inside of ERC-20 create, we're going to replace the div with a grid. Okay. Inside of the grid, we're gonna add some grid item XS for remember this is to for the grid item to take the entire width. Okay, great. Now on the grid, let's also set container spacing equals 2. So we have a spacing of 2, and we'll add some typography here. And we're gonna say, okay, so this is create token. This is a little title. A variant equals so h6. We're gonna set it to no wrap component. We're gonna set it as a div, and just a bit of custom styling. And we're gonna say it's a margin set to 1. Perfect. Now we're gonna add another grid item. And so this grid item will contain the name and symbol fields. So item, okay, no, as some attributes of grid, we're gonna say, well, the same as the first one. We're gonna say item XS equals 12. Perfect. Now inside of it, we're gonna ask, we're going to add a text field. Perfect. And the text field will have some attributes. So the first one will be label equals name. Then sx equals margin of 1, width of 25 ch. We're going to set some placeholder equals gold. And we also gonna have an onChange event. So the onChange event will handle whenever the user type in something inside the name field. So here we're gonna say, well, once there is a change, we have the event, and we will set token name to e.target.value. So basically the value entered. And that's it. And so we need this method since it is not defined yet. So let's go up there and define it. So we're going to say const token name, set token name equals use state of empty string. Empty string will be the default value. Now, as a second field, we're going to add the symbol. So we can do the same thing here. All right, text field. Okay. So we can have, the text field can also be self-closed, like so. So I will also put this one self-closed. So to respect the same kind of practices. Label will be symbol for this one. This is symbol. A little bit of custom styling. So the same as we had just up there. So margin 1 with 25 ch. Okay. And then we're going to have a placeholder. That's going to be GLD for gold. And then we're going to have some onChange event. So basically the same logic than for the name. That will say, well, set token symbol e.target that value, like so. And that's it. So the same thing here, we do not have set token symbol defined. So we will define it just in the same way we did with token name. So token symbol, set token symbol equals use state the default. Use state with the default value of empty string. Now, if we head to our web application, we can see that we have two text fields and the title. And so we can go back and to the main menu and press create token, and we have the name and symbol that we can enter. Unfortunately, we cannot do anything with it just yet. So we also need to add some create button below. And we also want to remember to set the token initial supply. So let's do this right now. Remember our default precision, because we have 18 decimals in the token value, is of 18 zeros. So we're going to say default, basically default initial supply. We'll set it to 1 token for the default initial supply. So it's going to be 1. And because we have 18 decimals of precisions, a combine followed by 18 zeros. So I have exactly 18 here. You can verify that if you use VS Code, just select all the zeros and you can see 18 selected down there. Okay. So now we have them, and we will add a state for the initial supply. So we'll say token initial supply set token um, set token initial supply equals use state, and we're going to pass the default initial supply as the default value. Now, down here, we are about to add the initial supply. So we're going to create another grid item. Okay, so it will have the attributes of item xs equals 12, just like this. And inside of here, we're going to have 3 text fields. So the first one, it's going to be for the initial supply. So, okay, so we're going to have the label initial supply raw. So why raw? Because we want this initial supply without any adjustments to the decimals. So for one token, we want really to display 1 and followed by 18 zeros. And then we're going to add some custom styling. So M1 margin 1 with 30 ch, like so. And then placeholder equals basically the default initial supply, then type, so it's going to be a number, and value equals token initial supply. So this is the state that we define here. And then on change, we're going to attach an event here, event handler, an arrow function that's going to say, hey, set the token initial supply to the entered value. And we can be sure the entered value is a number because we forced the type to be a number. Great, now we're going to continue and add another text field. This one is going to be for the initial supply adjusted to the decimals. So instead of showing just this value to the user, we are also going to show 1. So label, we're going to say initial supply adjusted sx equals. So we're going to say 1 of margin, same for the width. Okay, and we're going to say, okay, placeholder equals 1, then value. The value for now will equals nothing, because we will define a function that will translate basically this amount to 1 based on the decimals that we have. So we'll just continue and we'll come back later on once the structure of the file is completed. Okay, so now we can close the text field. I just added a variant field. And the last text field, so the last one will be text field label decimals SX. I just turned off all the suggestions because I think this was very annoying. So I hope it's better for you now. With a width of 10 ch, and the value will be 18. So we want to define it. We'll actually define it here. We'll say const default decimals will be equal to 18. Perfect. And so we will put the value here, default decimals, then put a type number on it, even though it's going to be disabled. Variant equals field, and we can close the type. Perfect. Now we have all the text fields customizable that we want, but we need one button to be able to submit the creation of the token. So we are going to do the last grid item. So we do item XS, so it's going to take the entire width again, like so. And inside of it, we're going to create a button. And this button will have some properties. So we'll say variant equals contained with some style as well. So margin 1. And we're gonna set an event handler to the onClick. So we're gonna call this onClick action because this button will have two functionalities. The first one, the creation of the token, and then when we click again on the button, it will take us to the token info page. And we'll set a property here that it's going to be really useful. So it's going to be disable equals loading. So why disable equals loading? Basically, this button will be disabled during the time we send the transaction to the Ethereum network. Because we don't want the user to be able to press the button multiple times while the user is waiting for its token to get submitted. So we're going to have loading here, and we're going to define onClick action and loading just afterwards. And so here we're just going to enter create for now, like so. Okay, so let's define loading and onClick action. So let's go up there, and loading is going to be pretty simple. It's going to be just here a new state. So const loading, set loading, and by default, you would have guessed it's not loading. So we'll set it to false. And we're going to define onClick action. So it's not going to do anything for now, because we first want to verify that the UI looks great. So it's going to be just an async function, async arrow function that basically just does nothing. So now it should compile well, and we're going to take care of those warning afterwards, so don't worry about them. So let's go to the application, and now you should be able to see our UI. So we have the name and the symbol as we previously had, and now we have the initial supply raw. So it's 1 and 18 zeros, and the initial supply adjusted, but it doesn't have any value yet. We're gonna work on that, and the decimals fixed to 18. And we have the create button, but of course it doesn't do anything for now. So let's implement the adjustment for the initial supply. So for this purpose, if you remember, we installed a library called decimal.js. So decimal will be really useful to create this function that will turn our token value with the 18 decimal into a more human readable value. The reason why we need decimal.js is fairly simple, because in JavaScript we cannot manipulate numbers that are bigger than number dot max safe integer. So this is this value. And so, I mean, we can play around with numbers higher than that, but there is a high probability that they're gonna be a problem. And if you take this amount and you put it here, well, you directly see that it's way bigger than this one right there. So we're gonna use decimal.js that basically allows us to manipulate big numbers. And so we will be able to make the function to adjust. So let's implement that function. And to do so, we are going to create a new folder in source. Let's call it utils. Inside of this folder, we'll create a new file called Ethereum API.js. And inside of it, we're going to define const decimal equal require decimal.js. And we're going to define the function that we want to use. So we'll call it apply decimal. And inside of this function, we're going to pass the row value, the number of decimals. So it's going to be 1 followed by 18 zeros in our example. Decimals, we're going to say 18. And then we want to be able to pass a sign. So we will not need this sign for this purpose right now. However, we will need it later, so I'm going to implement it now. Basically, by specifying a sign, you can say, hey, I want to translate 10 to the power of 18 or 10 to the power of minus 18. So that will allow us to do such a thing. So now, if there is no raw value, we can simply return an empty string. So this is used when the user will just inside of the text field. If the user clears entirely the raw value, well, this function will still get called. And so it will return an empty string instead of trying to process the value and return an error. And then we're going to return decimal. So basically what we're doing here, we're passing the raw value inside of this decimal function here, and it's going to create an instance of decimal that can handle the raw value. Because remember, the raw value can be huge. So decimal will allow us to manipulate. So now this, we can do some things. This is an instance of decimal, and we will multiply it by decimal 10 to the power of decimal. And here we're going to check the sign. So if the sign is positive, we're going to say just decimal, otherwise minus decimal. And we're going to return the toFixed version of it. So toFixed takes the calculated decimal and returns it into a string value. So as a string, there is no problem to get big values. So basically, if I input raw value here, what it does here is just multiplies it. For instance, the raw value, if I say apply decimals, so with 18 zeros here, it's gonna multiply it by 10 to the power of, because here by default it's negative, 10 to the power of minus 18. So sign is negative because it's by default, and then it's going to do basically this operation, which is very simple and equals to 1. So it's the adjusted value. All right, so now we have our function and we can use it. Great, so let's go back to ERC-20 create. And of course, we want to import this function. So we're going to do const apply decimals equals require. Actually, just go back to Ethereum API because we forgot to export it. My bad. Export equals apply decimals, like so. Great. So now we just have to do require. We'll go two folders level up, then utils, then simply Ethereum API. And now we do have our function. So this is great. So we can do, okay, apply decimal. And if you remember, in the initial supply adjusted, we let it blank. So now we are about to pass the function. So apply decimals, token initial supply, and the default decimals. Perfect. So now let's test this implementation. Let's go to the application we just made. Okay, and as you can see, it's 1. And if here I just set 1, well, now it does show, so it multiplies it by, as we said, by 10 to the power of minus 18. So it gives this value. And so now we are able to issue initial supplies of partial amounts if we want to. It's very customizable at this point. So let's say we want an initial supply of 15. Well, it's going to be this value as a raw value that we will need to pass in. Great, so now it works. And we will need to work now on the create. So let's jump back into the code. So now we need to access the compiled smart contract ABI in order to access the interface so we can generate the token and send the transaction. So for that purpose, inside of the ERC-20 folder, we're going to create an ERC-20 Token.js file. And so this file will give us direct access to the ABI of the contract. So module.export equals require. So we're gonna have to go a little bit up, then so twice, then go solidity, artifacts. So artifacts, the artifacts folder contains all the build information that you want. So we're going to go to source, solidity, contracts, ERC-20 token. So this is the token we created. And then ERC token.json. Perfect. So now inside, let's go back inside the ERC create. And inside of it, we're going to do const ERC20 token equals require the ERC-20 token. So from here, we have a direct access to the compiled ERC-20 JSON. For instance, we have direct access to the ABI, the bytecode, contract name, and so on. But there is a missing piece of the puzzle here, because we're missing Web3 to actually generate the contract transaction and send it, because we only have information about the token, but we cannot send it. And so let's go into Ethereum API. So this is inside of utils, Ethereum API. And from here, we're going to define Web3, so we will be able to access it elsewhere in our project. So let's do require Web3. Remember, at this point inside of the project, we are authenticated with the wallet. So we don't need to check the authentication here. Just do Web3 window.ethereum. So, and we'll just add Web3 here. Great. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go back to create, and next to apply decimals, we are also about to specify Web3 to import it. Great. So now what we're going to do, and this is very good, we can directly declare the Web3 token. So I'm going to do, okay, const Web3 token equals new Web3 dot Ethereum dot contract, and I'm going to pass the ERC-20 token dot ABI, so that our instance of the Web3 contract will be able to know how we can interact with the smart contract, since we're passing the ABI. Now let's implement the on-click action so we can actually create the token when we click on create. So first of all, we're going to do const accounts equals await to basically fetch all the accounts that are available to us from the wallet. So now we have them, and we're going to do a try catch here to catch any errors. Yeah, like so. And then we're going to do await Web3 token. So remember, Web3 token is the instance of the Web3 contract we created here. So await Web3 token dot deploy, and inside of deploy, we're going to say data ERC-20 token dot bytecode. So the bytecode is is basically the code of the contracts, of the compiled contracts. The ABI is only used in the client to know how to interact with the contract. But when we deploy the contract, so the token here, we want to deploy the bytecode. So for information, if you don't know, the bytecode looks like this. Okay. So we're deploying some data, and we are also specifying the arguments. So the arguments are the constructor arguments. So here we have token name, token symbol, and token initial supply. So remember, the token initial supply is in this form with all the decimals. Great. And so we may deploy, and do not forget to send I'm gonna deploy like this. Okay. And then we're gonna send. Okay. Send. And we want to send, we have to specify an account to send from. So we're gonna say account 0, the first account in the wallet. Great. So that's it. We've implemented the action click, and let's try it now inside of our application. Okay, I'm just gonna refresh, press create token. Recall, I like my silver coin a lot, so I'm gonna do silver SVR, initial supply of, let's say, 1, and then create. And as you can see now, it has generated the contract deployment. And so we have the estimated gas fee and everything, and we can confirm. And once we confirm, this will create this ERC-20 token with an initial supply of 1 and the name and the symbol. So we're going to confirm. And well, it did confirm, but we cannot see anything here. So we want to display some nice success message. And also, if you remember, we implemented a loading parameter in the create button that we are about to implement here to get kind of a nice touch to our UI. All right, so let's go back to ERC-20 create. And let's go to the top, and we are about to implement some messages. So let's implement both an error message with a default value of an empty string. And we also want a success message. So set success message equals useState of an empty string. And then we want to make use of those variables here. So inside of onClick action, we'll say, well, once you click, we actually want to reset the loading to false if it was true before. And we also want to reset the error message if there was any. Okay, not to 0, but to empty string. And now the error message, we also want to have it here if there is an error. So set error message, error.message here. Okay, great. And if the deployment went well, we also want a success message. Set success message. We're gonna say token successfully deployed at, and so from here we can actually get the address of the deployed contract, but we need to add a variable here to get the result from the await. Okay, so result will contain the address. So how to get it? Well, it's pretty easy. Just do result._address like so. And so result contains the address at this inside of this variable. Perfect. And after that, we also want to set the loading to false because we finished. And I just made a mistake up there, and I realized because here it's the beginning, we just clicked, so we want set loading to true, of course. Okay, great. And actually, we also want to reset the success message. So set success message. Okay, perfect. Now we need to add the success message and the error message at the bottom. So to do so, we will add, so first here we're going to say, well, if there is a success message, then display an alert with the severity equals to success. And inside of it, we're going to display the success message. Perfect. So we're going to do the same thing for the error message. Error message and alert. We're going to add a severity equals to error and error message. Okay, alerts. So now we are displaying the error and the success message whenever there is either an error or a message available. And so let's see how this works. Okay, so I'm just gonna refresh the page, create token. Again, well, I want to do the bronze one. BRZ sounds good to me. And with an initial supply of 10. And let's go and press create. And so, as you can see here, now it's disabled during the loading, so I cannot click anymore. And it's awaiting right now. So if I click on reject, well, it's gonna enable back the button because loading will turn to false. And the Metamask error will come up. But what if I create it properly and I confirm? Now we have a successful message. So we can see at which address the contract was just passed. So this is pretty nice in my opinion. And I'm gonna just do one more tweak to get the create button look a little better. So I'm gonna say, well, if this is loading here, if this is loading, then, well, display a circular progress, size equals 25. Otherwise, just display create. So what this does is that when I'm here, if I press on create, now I have a nice circular progress, which is pretty nice. So I prefer that than just the disabled look. And so if I press reject, then it comes back here. So great. Now we've successfully implemented the creation of an ERC-20 token. And so the next step will be to display information and fetch information about this token from the blockchain. And for that, we're going to go back to ERC-20 app. And from there, we're going to implement a function called import token. So the import token will allow us to access the import menu. This is where we're going to import the contract address for the token we created. So from here, we're just gonna add a new function at the bottom, just below on click create. So it's gonna be called const import token equals address arrow function. And from within this function, we're gonna say set token address will be address passed as parameter when we call this function, and we're gonna say set menu dot import. Okay. So when we call this function, we will set the menu to menu import and set the token address to the address passed as parameter. So what we want here is to pass the import token function into the ERC-20 create. So we're going to do import token equals the function import token. So what we're doing here is just basically passing it as a prop inside of ERC-20 create. And now we can go to ERC-20 create, and we will import at the top here, we will import the import token function as a prop. So it's going to be there, import token. And if you remember, we called the onClick function onClick action. So it can do two actions, and we're going to define the second action it can actually do. And we'll say, we will add a conditional here. We'll say, well, if there is a success message, then we want to display token info. And once we click on token info, we will go into the import menu with the address of the created token. Like this. Otherwise, so I'm just going to pick this. Otherwise, so if there is no success message defined, we want to display the create, and if it's loading something, well, we're gonna load it. So okay, success with double C here, and we're good to go. Great. I'm just gonna put it in one line. So basically, if there is a success message, we display token info. So when the token is created, we display token info on the button. Otherwise, if the state is loading, we display the circular progress. So basically, the spinner that we've seen previously. Otherwise, create. And if we go back a little bit up, so in the onClick action, we're going to add something here to handle the import. So we're going to say, hey, if there is a success message when we click on the button, so in that state, the button will display token info. Well, we want to call the function import token that we just imported here. And we're going to pass a Web3 token that options dot address, and then we're going to return. So we need to do one last thing here, is to set the address, assign the address to the Web3 token options. So we're going to do that just here. So Web3 token dot options dot address equals result underscore dot underscore address, like so. I'm going to save this, and if I go back to my application now, if I press on create token and I create a token, I will fast forward so we don't have to wait in the video for the confirmation. Okay, so it's successful, and we can see our message here. And since there is a success message, now we can click on token info. And if we do so, we are now entering into the import menu that we defined. So from here, we are about to display a data grid with information that we will fetch about the contract from the blockchain. So let's do this. So from here, we're going to create a new component for the import menu. So inside the source components ERC20 folder, we're going to create a new file, ERC20 import.js. Okay, and from here, we're going to add a new React arrow export. So just an arrow function that will export, and we can save this. So now we're heading to ERC-20 app. And inside of ERC-20 app, we want to add support for the new menu. So here we're going to do if menu equals menu.import and ERC-20 import. Again, I'm pressing tab, so it's going to automatically add an import here. And finally, we're about to pass the token address inside of ERC-20 import as a prop. For that, we're going to do token address equals token address. And we're going to close here. So what we're doing here, when we actually are inside of the main menu and the user clicks on click create, okay, as we can see here. So it's going to set the menu to create. We're going to enter create, and inside the create menu, once the token is created, the user will call import token by clicking on by hitting the token info button. So import token will set the token address to the created token address. And now when we are entering the import menu, we are passing the token address inside of this menu. Okay, so from here is going to get a little bit exciting. We're going to fetch the name, the symbol, the total supply, the decimals, and the current balance of our user from the blockchain. So to do so, let's head into ERC-20 import. So right here, and we're going to import a few things here. So instead of React, I'm going to import use state, use effect. Okay, and then I also want to import some things from Material UI. So grid, typography, and box from UI material. And finally, we want to import the data grid. Data grid from UI / x data grid, like so. Okay, perfect. So now we do have our return already. The first thing we want to do here is we will need our ERC-20 token. So we'll do ERC-20 token equals require current folder ERC-20 token. Great. And below that, we'll also need Web3 as well as apply decimals. So we've already worked with that, so you know what it is. Equals require, and we're gonna have to go a bit upward to utils / Ethereum API. Right. Now, inside of ERC-20 import, we want to add the prop that we specified. So this is the token address for this is the address of the token. So after the creation, it will be passed in here. And we want to add a new state. So we'll do const token data set token data equals use state. And it's going to be an array. So, okay, there's going to be an array of object. And we're going to use this array to display the grid, the data grid. So basically, it's going to be all the rows. So the first row is of ID 0, it's going to be its name is going to be address. Then the value will be token address. So the value passed here as a prop. Then the second one will be ID 1 with the name of name. This is the name of the token that we're going to fetch from the blockchain. Then we're going to have ID 2 with the name of symbol. Same here, the value. For the rest of all those values, the default will be empty string. So ID 3, name, total supply, value empty string again, then ID 4 with the name of decimals, and a value of empty string, and the final one is going to be with ID 5, you guessed it, name will be current balance. And so this is the current balance related to the user's wallet in the browser, and with the value of empty string. So great, so now we have this use state that we're setting to a default value, so basically empty strings. Now we're going to define the columns for our data grid. It's going to be const columns equals field name, like so, header name. So the header name will be token, and we're going to set a width of 150. And the second one, and this is the last one, field, it's going to hold the values. So field value, header name, value, and width 500. Great. Okay, so we defined our columns here, and now we're about to go down there into the return, and inside of the div we're going to create a grid. So we want to specify some custom attributes. Grid container spacing equals inside brackets 2. Then we want to have a grid item equals 12. And inside of this grid item, we want to have a typography variant equals h6, no wrap, component equals div, sx equals margin of 1, like so. I just indented my code, and I'm going to close here. I'm going to say I'm going to have token info in there, and then I'm going to close the typography. Okay, great. I also need to close this grid item. So I will add one grid like this. So it seems we're missing one last package here, and this is a module that's called Material UI/core. So we're going to install it. Just input npm install Material UI/core. Okay, so I successfully installed the package, and just so you know, I had to stop my development server to finish the installation and start it again. So now we're about to add the data grid. So we're going to do grid item xs, so it takes the entire width. Well, sx equals, this is a little bit of custom styling, height 450 pixels. Then I'm going to close this and completely close the grid item. Inside of it, we're going to put the data grid with the rows. So the rows is going to be the token data that we defined earlier, and then the columns will be columns. Okay. And I'm going to close the data grid. So now we are, we do have the data grid that will show the address, name, symbol, total supply, and everything, but just with empty values. So what we want to do now is make use of the use effect to implement the fetch of the data from the blockchain. So this part will be very interesting for you. So let's start. So use effect. We've already used use effect in the past, and if you don't know what it actually do, well, use effect is will be called when first rendering our object, and it will also be called whenever we make some changes to some of the property inside of the effect. So, and for us, for now, we don't want to make any change to the properties. Like we import one address and that's it. So use effect will, for now, be only called once. So we'll declare one function that's going to be called fetch data. Okay, so this is asynchronous because we're going to make calls to Metamask to get the information from the blockchain. So just after, we're going to call it to make sure it gets called. Great. And inside of it, we're going to do const web3 token equals new web3 dot ethereum dot contract. And inside of it, we're going to pass the ABI of our contract. So we'll let our Web3 contract instance know how to interact with the ERC-20 token. Then we're going to pass the token address. So Web3 will know where to reach the token on the blockchain. And we will one by one fetch the fields. So the first one will be name. So we'll do web3 token. To access the methods of our ERC-20 token, I'll do methods dot name, like so, and then I'm going to call to get it from the blockchain. So call will not send the transaction to the blockchain, but it will look into the current state of the Ethereum blockchain, and it will get the name for our token. So the method name here, actually all the methods we will call are implemented inside of this ERC-20 token. And so if I quickly go back to Solidity and into our token contract, let me go there. So if you remember, our token contract inherits from ERC-20, and if I go to ERC-20, I'm inside of it, and there are couple methods here. So we've got the method name that returns the name, symbol that returns the symbol, decimals, total supply, balance of, and all that. So what we're about to do is we're about to implement the use of all those methods. So we will be able to call all the ERC-20 token methods from the blockchain. So the first one we're doing here is name, but we're going to do symbol and all the others after that. Let's go back to ERC-20 import. So now we do have fetched the name. Let's go and continue with the symbol. So symbol await web3 token dot method dot symbol like so that call. Then const total supply equals await web3 token methods dot total supply. This is the name of the function that call. Then we're going to do const decimals equals await web3 token that methods that decimals, and we're going to call it again perfect. And then we're going to do const account equals await web3 dot ethereum dot get accounts, and const current balance equals await web3 token dot methods dot balance of. So this is to get the current balance. Well, so we're going to say, hey, give me the balance of the accounts, the first account in my wallet. And we're going to call this function. Great. Then after we've fetched all of those information, we do want to set them into token data. So we're going to do set token data. And we actually, we want to keep the address. So instead of overriding the entire token data object, we can also take this function, set token data, and we can have as the first parameter the current value of token data. So that's what we're going to do. And we're not going to override it, but we're just going to modify some of its properties. For instance, the token data 0, which is the address, will stay the same, while we will update the other ones. So we'll have token data 1. We want to keep the name and all that, but we just want to update the value. This is what we're doing here. Great. So we're going to do that for all the values. Token data 2 value symbol, and token data 3 value. So for this one, the token data 3, which is the total supply, if you remember, the total supply is a precise number of that contains the full precision. So for instance, the total supply, if it's 1, well, it will contain 18 zeros. So here we want to display some human readable kind of string. So we will use the function we've created already. So apply decimals, total supply, decimals. Then for the fourth field, we're going to do token data 4 value decimals, and then token data 5 value apply decimals. And for the last one, this is for the balance. So the same thing happens for the balance. We want to display the balance in a human readable way. So it's way better this way. One last thing, The balance method here is actually balance off. Okay, great. So let's go to the app now and we'll see how it looks like. So let's create a token called whatever, bronze BRZ. I'm going to create it, confirm. Okay, and now it's deployed. So let's click on token info. And as you can see here, the bronze symbol, total supply decimals, and current balance have been fetched from the blockchain and are now displayed here. So now we will add all the other methods that allow us to transfer some of those amounts, to check the balance in a more specific way, and also to allow and approve payments. So let's go back to our code. So inside of use effect, we want to add a second parameter here, which is going to be an array that will contain the token address. So what this does is basically use effect will check if the value of token address did change before rerunning this. Because otherwise, if we don't set token address, use effect will be called every time there is a rendering. And so we don't want fetch data to be called constantly. Now, we will implement a couple of functions from the contract. So it's going to be balance of, transfer, transfer from, approve, and allowance. So let's do that and create first a new folder inside ERC-20. Let's call it import menu. It's going to contain other components that are only used inside of the import menu. And so inside of it, we're going to create allowance.js. So one component for each function of the ERC-20 token we will implement. So approve.js, another one called balanceof.js, another one called transfer.js, and finally transfer from.js, like so. So it's going to be 5 files. But we're going to start with balance off, since it's a pretty easy one to implement. And you're going to get, you're going to understand pretty fast how we can work with it. Okay, so let's do a narrow export function like so. And instead of React, we're going to import simply use state. Okay, use state from React. And we're about also to import grid text field button alert typography from MIUI material. Okay, and we will need also the apply decimal function that we created to get a better, more understandable, human readable balance. So we're gonna have to go up and then utils and find our Ethereum API. Okay. Then inside of balance off, we will have two props. The first one will be Web3 token and then token data. Then we're going to define const decimals equals token data. So this is a way to find the decimals from within the token data that we're going to pass from ERC-20 import. And this is a very easy way to do so. We're going to find the property with the name decimals value. Great. So we're iterating inside of token data, trying to find the field that has the name decimals. And once we find it, we assign its value back to the variable decimal. Now we're gonna set some state. Const data set data equals use state. So this is gonna take into account the arguments that we're gonna pass to the function. And also we want to display some nice error message, some results, and the result is going to be the balance, which is basically the result of the function. So make sure you type use state properly here, and then we will directly here inside of the div, we will not return a div, but we will return a grid. So grid with the attribute container grid item xs equals 12, like so. And then inside of it, we're gonna add one button, okay, with some attributes. The first one will be variant contained sx for a bit of styling, with margin 1. Then on click for the, so this is when we click on the balance off. So we want there to process the call and send it to the blockchain. On click balance off, and inside of it we're going to say balance off, just to describe the function address owner. Then we're going to add some typography variant equals subtitle 1, no wrap, display equals, so it's going to be inline component. So this is a label to let the user know where the result is. Component equal div sx equals margin 1. Inside of it, we're gonna input result, and then we're gonna add a text field. And inside of the text field, we want a few attributes. First of all, some custom styling. So the text field here will contain the result. Margin 1 with 30 ch, size 1, a large one, and the value will contain data.result. So data.result is this value here. It's going to be the result of the function call. Input label props. So this is for the styling, so it shrinks properly through. You can see all those properties and what they do on the material UI documentation. But variant, so the standard variant. And finally, what we want, which is very important, we want to be able to input who the owner is. So for instance, I want to know the balance of one owner or another owner. So being able to input an address into a text field that will be used during the function call. So we're going to do text field label equals owner sx, couple of custom styling as well, margin 1 width 50 ch size equal, we're gonna have a small one here, and placeholder equals 0x unchange. We're gonna have an unchange event here that will set the address to data. So the way we're about to do this is by doing set data argument 1. So this is the first argument inside of the function call. Be the targeted value to get the value from the event. Result is for now just an empty string, and error message will be an empty string as well. This is a good way to reset result and error message as empty strings as well. And here we're going to have input label props, same as above, with shrink equals true. Okay. And finally, the last one, the last grid element, grid item, I would say. We're going to have the attribute item xs as usual, so it's going to take the entire width of the page. And we're going to say with the conditional here, data.error message. So in the case of an error message, we'll display an alert with severity equals error. And okay, we can put that on multiple lines to get it a bit more readable. Okay, severity error, and on close. So we'll be able to close this alert. So we want to clear the message when it closes. So really simple, we're gonna do onClose, say data. Append the previous data values and just replace error message with nothing. And so now we do have our alert that's complete. And inside of our alert, we want to display, of course, data.error message. Great. Okay, so now we do display the error message. And I'm going to indent my code. So now we do display the error message if there is any, but we need to now make the function call and set the error message, set the result. So this is going to be the most interesting part here. So if you remember here, we set an onClick event that we'll call onClick.BalanceOf. So let's define what onClick.BalanceOf does. onClick.BalanceOf will be an asynchronous function. So asynchronous arrow function, like so. I'm going to do let row balance equals empty string. I'm going to add a try here. So it's going to be a try catch with row balance equals await web3 token dot methods dot balance off, like so. And we're going to pass in the data.arg1. So this is the argument that we set previously, and we're going to call right away. In the catch, we want to set, so if there is an error, we want to set data, keep what we have in data already, and just set the error message to error.message. Perfect. And then return. And if everything goes right, we're going to do a const adjusted balance. So this is for a human readable balance. We're going to use our function that now you know pretty well. Apply decimals, row, balance, decimals. Okay, now we're going to do set data, and we will set the result with the adjusted balance. Great, so now before we can be able to use balance off, we need to implement this component inside of ERC-20 import. So at the bottom of ERC-20 import, we're going to add here a new box that will contain the component. So let's have a box here, and the box will have a few attributes. So border 1, SX for a bit of styling, margin top of 2, a border radius of 1, and some border color of, let's say, light gray. Okay, great. Now, inside of the box, this is where we are putting our components. So let's do balance off. And when I do tab here to autocomplete, make sure it imports balance off. And you also have this import for the component at the top as well. So balance off, I'm going to pass Web3 token. So this is the Web3 instance of the token and the token data. Token data. Okay, token data. We have it here. Great. Now it doesn't know yet the Web3 token instance, so we're going to create it up here. So we do have it here, but this one is only created during the fetch of the data, and we cannot really just take this one and put it here as a constant and then use it inside of fetch data. Otherwise, React will complain that we need to add the Web3 token as one of the dependencies of useEffect, and we don't want to do that. So we're just going to add the exact same logic up here. So Web3 token, we got a new Web3.Ethereum.contract ERC-20 token.ABI, token address. Great. So now we've defined our Web3 token contract. So let's test this in the app. Okay, so here I have one token, and it's the silver token, and I can do now balance of address owner and pass the address of the owner for which I want to check. So if I don't set anything, well, now I have an error message that I can dismiss. And so let's put the balance of, for instance, my address, my public address as the owner, and now balance of, and the result is 1. So it works. For instance, we can check the balance of the contract token, and it has 0. So this is working well. But there is one thing I would like to improve here. It's the fact that if I go back here, well, I must create a token to access the token info again. So I would like to be able to just paste my token contract address and actually access directly to the data of this address. So we'll take care of the import. We'll add an import button here with an address text field so we can enter an address. So let's do that. Let's head back to the ERC-20 main menu, and under create token here, under this grid item, we're going to add a new grid item that's going to allow us to import an address. So let's do access equals 12 and close the grid item. Inside of it, we're going to place a text field. Okay, text field with some attributes. So we're going to have as a label token address, then SX equals M margin 1 with the width of 50 ch. Placeholder will be equal to 0x. Size equal small. Value. The value will be equal to the token address. So this is a variable that we're going to define up here on change. We're going to attach an event to this. And basically we're going to say, well, when this field is changed, we want to set the token address. And again, this is a function that we will define just after that. So, okay, either target that value, perfect. And now we also want, after the text field, we want a button, like so. And so the button will have the text of import token. And we're going to set a couple of attributes inside of the button. The first one will be variant equals contained. SX equals, just to get a little bit of margin, 1. And then we're going to have, when we click on this button, we will import the address. So we'll import the token and we'll enter the token info menu, so the import menu. Okay, so when we click, we call import token with token address as a variable. And now we need to define, so import token, set token address, and token address. To do so, up here, we will first define the state for token address. So token address, set token address is equal to use state of empty string. So simply when we enter an address here, is going to set the address in set token address. Great. And we want to go up to the ERC-20 app, where we will have access to import token. Okay, so let's go to ERC-20 app. And here we are going to add the import token as a prop. So not only we will have onClick create here, but we also will have import token, which is a function. Just as a reminder, the import token function sets the token address to the state here in the ERC-20 app and sets the menu to menu.import. So we're passing it as a prop inside of ERC-20 main menu. So I'm back into the ERC-20 main menu file, and I want to import the import token. So let's import it as a prop, import token, and now we just imported it. And now when we will click on the button, it will actually call the import token, so switch to the import menu with the token address. So let's test this in our app right now. Okay, so I have my app that's updated. I did let the contract token address here and the URL just for me to copy paste. And now I can paste the token address, click on import token, and now we're into the token info, so it's the import menu, and we can have access to all our info. So we don't need now to create a token to access its information. So it's very, very useful, and it will make us gain pretty much a lot of time for future methods to be able to test. All right, so let's continue, and we will implement the transfer method now. Before the transfer, we're going to go a bit faster now because we've already done the balance off, and it's a little bit similar. So const transfer, we're going to do an arrow function with an export like this. And we're going to import from React use state. And we're also going to import from MUI/material, we're going to import grid, text field, button, alert, and circular progress. So from MUI/material. Great. So now we also want Web3 as well as our util function apply decimals. So let's get this. We have to go a bit up. Utils Ethereum API. Okay. Now inside of transfer, so what I want here, I wanted to get two things from the upper component. So we're gonna pass to the transfer component. We're gonna pass the Web3 token, just as we did for BalanceOf, and also the token data. And here we're going to do const symbol equals token data dot find. Basically, we're gonna try to find the field that has the name symbol in the token data, and then we're going to get its value. And we're gonna do the same to fetch the decimals. So token data dot find x dot name equals decimals, like this. Great. So now we also want one state. So just like in BalanceOf, we had the state result. Here we also want the state with the arguments and all that. But here we are not going to have a result because for transfer, we will display a success message or an error message, but there is nothing coming back from the blockchain, no value, just some messages. So we're gonna do use state argument 1. So the first argument will be the address, and the second will be the value. So I will have argument 2. Then we're going to have an error message in case there is an error during the message send transaction, and then the success message, like this. Finally, we're going to have a loading variable to display a circular progress on the button while we are waiting for the blockchain to answer. Okay, now let's go back here. And instead of returning a div, we will return a grid. Okay, so this grid will have an attribute called container inside of it. And we're going to have one item with the attribute item xs. So it will take the entire width as usual. And inside of it, we're going to have one button. And this button will have a few attributes. So variant equals contained. Then some styling, margin 1, on click equals, so the event, and it's going to call, once we click on this button, it's going to call onClick transfer. This is a function we are going to define afterwards. And after onClick, the last attribute will be disabled. We're going to disable this button, when we have data.loading when it's equal to true. Okay, now we're going to have a conditional here. So if data is loading, we want to display a circular progress, let's say with a size of 25, like this. And then if it's not loading, well, we want to just display what this button does. So it's gonna display the method definition, which is address to and uint2 156 value as such. Okay, great. Now we want at the bottom, we want a few text fields so that we can enter the address to send to and the value that we want to send. So for this, we're going to create another grid item. So with the attribute x item and xs equals 12. Perfect. And inside of it, we're gonna have one text field with a few attributes. So the first one is going to be 2 label equals 2. Then we're gonna have sx equals margin 1 width 50 ch, size equals small, placeholder equals 0x because it's an hexadecimal address, onchange equals, so the event. So when we change the text, so inside of this text field, so when we change the address we want to send to, we want to update the data state. So we're going to do set data, and we want to keep some of the current data, and we're going to set argument 1 to event.target.value. This is the value entered, and we want to clear the message. So the two messages are error message and success message. Okay, so now that we cleared the message, we're gonna add one more attribute for the style of the text field. So input label props equals shrink true, and then disabled equals data.loading. So once we click, we also want to disable this field while we are waiting for the transaction to be processed. And we will add another text field. So this is the last one. So text field, this one will be for the amount we want to send. So label equals value, sx equals margin of 1, bit of width. So let's say 30 ch, size equal small. We'll have a placeholder of 1, type equals number because we can only send a number, and we'll attach this with an event on change. So we want to do, well, the event will set data. So let's keep some of the previous data, and we're going to update argument 2. So argument 2 is the value we want to send inside of the function. Value, and then just as we did for the previous onchange event on the other text field, we want to clear the messages as well. Great. Now let's add the two attributes. So for a bit of styling, shrink true and disabled equals data.loading, like this. Perfect. Now we need to do one last grid item, and this one is going to be really short compared to what we've written so far. And so for this one, it's going to be a grid like this with two attributes. So the first one, item, then XS as usual, X is 12. And the first one is going to display the error message if there is any. So it's a conditional. If there is a data.error message, then we will display an alert like this with the severity as the attribute, severity error, and a non-close. We're gonna indent it so it's easier to make it easier to read. Okay. And there you go. All right. So now we will have a non-close equals set data. So we're going to keep most of the current data and just set the error message. This is when we dismiss the message to empty string. And so inside of this alert, I think you guessed it, but we're going to display the data.error message. Great. Now let's do the exact same condition for the success message. So data, I'm going to be a bit faster here. Data.success message. We want to display an alert. Okay. Then this alert will have the severity of success, and on close will simply clear the success message. So we keep most of the data and we just set the success message to empty string like this. Perfect. And then we're going to do data.successMessage. Perfect. Okay, so we have our two error message here. We have our text fields, our button to submit, but how can we submit this? Because we cannot for now because we haven't implemented this function. So let's go ahead and implement this function. So let's go to just above the return here. And we're going to do const on click transfer equals an asynchronous function. Okay. And so we're going to say, well, when we enter this function, we want to set data. So we keep all the data, but we want to set loading to true because we're starting to initiate the transfer. Then we're going to initialize an error message as an empty string, then a success message as an empty string. And we're going to add a try catch, and inside of this try catch, this is where we're going to implement the transfer with the blockchain. So we're going to fetch the accounts from the wallet. So await web3.ethereum.get accounts, and then const amount to send. So we're going to do apply decimals because the amount we will send that we pass to the text field here will be the adjusted amount, meaning that if we want to send one token, we need to multiply the value because the user will only enter 1, for instance, but we need to multiply it by 10 to the power of 18. So we need to pass the very long value, and therefore we need to translate this value. So we'll use our function apply decimals here. We're going to do data.argument2, which is the value to send, pass the decimal, and here we're going to apply positive, because if you remember, our function apply decimals, I'm going into it, has the sign negative as the default to apply. So it by default it multiplies by 10 to the power of minus 18, and we don't want that. Because if we enter 1, we want to enter 1 followed by, we want to send 1 followed by 18 zeros, and not the other way around. Okay, so now let's send this amount. So web3 token dot methods dot transfer. Okay, transfer like this. Data that argument 1, which is the address we want to send the token to, the amount, and then for a second argument we're gonna send the amount to send that we just calculated here, and then we're going to do dot send. And when we send, we need to specify the account from where we're sending. So in this case, it's going to be account 0, so the first account available in the wallet. So if this passes, we're going to set the success message equals to transfer successful. And let's put a bit more precision. So data.argument2 to show the value. And then we can also show the symbol. So it's going to show in a pretty nice way. Like, for instance, 5 SVR and send. Great. So this is working pretty well. And now in the catch, if there is an error, we want to set the error message equals to error.message. Okay. Now just below this, we want to update the messages and set the loading to false, since we are done with the transfer at this point. So data loading false, error message, and success message. Now let's implement the transfer component in the ERC-20 import, and we also want to make sure that we are passing those to the transfer component. So let's go back to ERC-20 import, and here, so we're just going to do something very simple, the same logic as we've done with balance off. So if you want to go a bit faster, you can take this and you can copy and paste it below, just like this. And instead of the balance off here, you can rename with transfer. Okay, transfer. Okay, then for me, I just have to hit tab and also make sure that transfer is imported at the top here. And now I verify that I do have my transfer component for which I pass the Web3 token and token data. So let's check how it looks like in the app. Okay, so now I have my app here, and I do have my transfer function now. And so let's check again my balance, how much of this token I do have in my account. And so balance of owner, boom. Okay, I do have one. Okay, so this is great. But I want to send, what if I send back to the contract some of my token? And actually, when I do that, remember that if you're sending to another address, well, if it's not an address of someone, well, you will never be able to recover the funds. So I'm just going to send 0.5 of my token to this address, but I'll never be able to get it back. That is just for the purpose of this video. So let's do a transfer to this address, and I'm going to transfer 0.5, and let's transfer. So as you can see, the circular progress here is working well. And look, there is something cool here. Metamask recognized that we are sending an ERC token, so it fetched the information from the blockchain and showed that, oh wow, okay, we are using an SVR, the symbol we set when we created the token, and it's 0.5 SVR. So it also detected that we're using 18 decimals and that we're sending 0.5 SVR. So let's confirm that we're sending our SVR to this address. And great, as you can see here, the transfer is successful. 0.5 SVR has been sent. And so now this address owns 0.5, and I can check the balance of my address. So if I click on balance off, I can now see 0.5. And let's take the contract address, paste it in, and now I click on balance off again, and it tells me 0.5. So our transfer worked, and this is awesome. But there is one thing I want to improve. It's a little improvement I want to do, because for now our current balance is still at 1, and I'd like to get this data here to refresh. So instead of refreshing the page here, which won't work because in our application we don't have routes, so it just resets all the state. But what we're about to do here, we're going to implement a quick function that will allow us to refresh the data grid. Okay, so at the top of ERC-20 import, we will add some state here. Just put a new state after Web3 token, and name it const token refresh set token refresh. It's going to be an integer, so a number, and we're going to have the default value at 0, and basically this is a counter, and whenever this counter increases, the data grid will get refreshed. So this is going to be very useful for us. So what we want to do is to implement here the function. We'll call it refresh the refresh data grid. Refresh data grid equals to an arrow function that will call set token refresh, that will take the current value and will simply return the current value incremented, like so. And for the use effect to be called, we want to take token refresh, so this data here, and pass it as the second parameter to this array. So basically this array says that whenever one field into this array changes, one variable, use effect will be called again. So once we increment and call refresh data grid, well, this token refresh variable will be incremented with set token refresh t++ t to increment, and then this token refresh value will be incremented and use effect will be run again. So now we will pass this function within as a prop to transfer. So let's do this. Refresh data grid equals refresh data grid. Great. And now we will go inside of transfer. And let's get the prop value here. So Web3 token data, refresh data grid. And very simply, we're going to call this refresh function just after the success message. So whenever a transfer is complete, we want to call refresh data grid to refresh the balance. So let's try this in our app. Okay, so now the app is saying that I have 1 as the current balance, but if we remember well, I do not have 1. Actually, I only have 0.5. So let's do a balance of, yeah, I do have 0.5. And I want that when I transfer some, so I will transfer again to the contract, the original token contract, I will give it 0.25 transfer, and we'll check that the current balance is indeed refreshed. So let's confirm. And great. Transfer successful of 0.25 SVR, and now it did update my current balance. So we completed the implementation of BalanceOf and transfer. If you've made it to this part, well, congratulations. We've covered quite a lot of things during this course. So first we created a React application. Then we created and compiled our own smart contract using OpenZeppelin as the standard. Then we implemented the user interface to create the ERC-20 token with this create button and this create menu over here that allowed us to enter the name, the symbol, the initial supply. We also understood what the decimals meant for ERC-20. And then after the creation, we implemented the import. So we've learned how to fetch data from the blockchain using Web3. And we also understood what was going on with the contract ABI and the bytecode that we needed to interact with. So we needed the ABI to interact with the contract in our client side, and we needed the bytecode to be able to deploy the contract on the blockchain. Then we've taken a look at those two methods here, which are standard methods for ERC-20, so BalanceOf and transfer. The course is over now, and at the beginning I wanted us to implement transfer from and allowance and approve, but I think it's going to be a bit redundant, it's going to be repetitive. So I think with the basis that you have now, you should be able to implement allowances here, approve, and transfer from. So it would be a great exercise for you to do so. And then that will test your skills and that will test if you really understand what you've done and also how to make calls to the blockchain. Finally, if you need more guidance for those last, or if you're blocked, you can see in the description of this video, you'll find a link to the GitHub, and you can just clone the project from the GitHub and you will see the complete implementation of those functions here. So thanks guys for tuning in. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask in the comment section. And also, if you like the video, just drop a like and subscribe if you want more content. I will be posting more content about smart contract and blockchain programming in general. And so thanks for tuning in, guys, and I see you next time.